Hey there, this is Alissa. Welcome back to my channel. In today's tutorial, we are going to put together a pair of French knickers, and I have patterned these so that they match my silky satin cami that I released a couple months ago. I will leave the links for both of those down below. You can download them in a PDF pattern. And if you are new to the channel, I'm a pattern and sample engineer for the garment and textile industries, and I make videos on style and sewing patterns and tutorials. So if you're into that sort of thing, I would love to have you join my positive style and sewing community. I am building that up. And definitely hit the bell notification because I don't upload every week consistently yet. So if you hit that bell notification, then you won't miss any of the free patterns that I give away periodically. So in this tutorial, I have put together the shorts in two different ways. I've used the silky satin fabric, and then I put them together with a cotton poly blend. It's a sheet that I upcycled, and I edited the video so that you can see both of those processes side by side. And when you make your French knickers, find me on social media. It's at Alissa C. Montanez and hashtag Alissa C. Montanez. I would love to see your work. The first fabric that I used was a silky satin fabric. I also used that for the cami. And then the second fabric I used, it was just an upcycled sheet. I think this came from Target. It's a poly cotton blend. So I've cut out my front and my back, 2-ply of each, and my front and my back of the sheets upcycle, 2-ply of each. I've also put my notches on there with an air dry marker. And then I'm going to sew the center back and the center front. And the pattern has a 3/8 inch inseam on there. Just making a note of that. So you can do two types of edge finishing. You can use your overlock serger to edge finish, or you can do a tight-ish zigzag. I've set the machine to a zigzag stitch in between a 1 and a 2 on the length and about a 3 on the width, and then the needle position in the middle and the tension a little less than the 3. All the edges that need to be finished, you could go ahead and do that. All of the edges that you need to do, you can do a zigzag stitch, or if you have your serger, you can go ahead and do a serging edge on the silky satin. I pretty much keep my overlock machine in a 4-thread safety stitch. It's my go-to. So I'm using that to finish this, and that's going to give that over edge finish, but it's also stitching the two pieces together. So I've done the center back and the center front here. They're basically identical. This is a little trick that I like to use for my serged edges. I like to pull all of the strands, and then that creates this little knot. I know some people do get a crochet hook and like thread it back up through the serged edge, but that just seems so time consuming when this does a pretty decent knot on the end there. I've never had one come undone. And then if you're doing the cotton version, you're just going to do a 3/8 inch seam allowance on the center back, as well as the center front, just going all the way down. I think it looks kind of like it's more work to do the zigzag edge and then the straight stitch afterwards, but I really don't think that it makes that much of a time difference, just like a minute or two per piece. And then for the silky one, I put my right sides together of my front and back pieces, and I'm matching up the inseam, and I'm going to pin that down because that needs to get stitched straight across. This pattern has a 3/8 inch inseam, so when you're doing that 4-thread safety stitch, it gives you just like slightly less than a 3/8 inch inseam, but it's fine. There's enough ease in this garment that that's not really going to make a difference. So when I'm pinning and it's a serged edge, I'm just making sure that those are flipping like opposite each other so that I'm not creating bulk within that seam. Same thing here with the poly cotton blend. I'm making sure to flip open those seams so that they lay flat. Then taking that to my machine and my serger and just serging that inseam area. It's a short inseam, but you know, they're flirty. So to add the lace, we're gonna make sure that we're putting right sides together of the lace and the center back and center front, and just pinning that. And depending on your lace, I actually used a stretch lace for this. It doesn't really matter. Just make sure that you're cutting your lace to the exact length of the shorts. You don't wanna have a stretch lace and then cut it too short and then have your shorts kind of pucker on the legs. That's not the look that we're going for. So I'm applying the lace to both leg openings. I didn't really pin it all the way around. I just pinned it basically at the start and the finish and then in the middle. That's good enough for me. But if you're a beginner sewer, definitely pin. Over pinning is fine. I take that to my machine if I'm doing the serger, sticking that under there, and that 4-thread safety stitch is just going to tie it all together. It's going to overlock the lace edge and then make sure that it's stitched on correctly. If y'all were wondering about my overlock machine, this is the Professional 5 and it is quite pricey. I don't think it's a beginner level overlock machine, but I will say that I have had it for, I think, 8 years at this point, and it was worth every single penny. And then we're going to need to top stitch that lace down so that it doesn't flip up. I take that to my machine and I'm just doing a narrow top stitch on there. Now, sometimes when you're a beginner sewer, your top stitching can kind of look like you were drunk when you were sewing because it's like going all over the place. I have a little trick for that. I switch out the foot. I have this foot, I will link it down below. Mine came in a kit. I think you might be able to get it just as a one-off, but my kit was only $20. I bought that like 8 years ago as well. It was completely worth the money because it comes with 32 different feet. I mention it in every single video. So that has this little trough that whatever you're top stitching, it digs in the ditch and it creates this really nice top stitched edge with a really even stitch. You can go much faster using this foot than if you were just trying to eyeball it and cross your fingers. So it should look something like that. And then I have the seams alternating on the inside at the inseam just to reduce the bulk. So if you're finishing the polycotton blend shorts, then I like this trick where if I have to do a rolled hem, what I do is a very narrow 1/4 inch straight stitch. And sometimes I have to loosen the tension on the machine. I think I bumped the tension down to a 2 on my machine when I did this. And so I take that, and that's acting as this kind of guide for the fabric to fold really nicely. And then I can just fold it once and then twice. And that gives me this really nice rolled edge. And especially when it's more of a curve like it is on the leg of this shorts, there's a tendency for it to kind of pucker and bacon. And this, by doing this straight stitch first, I don't have to use pins. Use pins if you're a beginner, but I don't have to use pins because it just kind of lends itself to being folded because you've already put that memory of a line down the fabric. We need to sew up the sides, and I'm going to use the overlock because I need to finish the sides first before I stitch them together. And I'm stitching from the lace upwards, and then I'm going to veer off at that second mark, the middle mark. I just need it to be finished up to that point. And I'm going to do that on all 4 sides. The front, the 2 sides in the front, and then the 2 sides in the back, making sure that I veer off right in that middle notch. And then when the sides are finished, I'm going to pin it so that I can take that to my machine and straight stitch it. And I'm just gonna straight stitch it for that like couple of inches. I think it's only 2 inches on there. And then I'm going to take it to my machine and I'm going to straight stitch it just where I've pinned it, just between those 2 pins. It doesn't seem like much, but you'll understand what I'm going to do in a minute. It's slightly complicated when you're trying to finish the edges and, serge it at the same time. So here I am, it's a 3/8 inch seam allowance again, and then I'm just going from the top mark to the bottom mark, just a couple of inches. And then I'm taking it back to my serger after I pin the sides. I'm gonna pin the sides up to the hip on both sides, and then go ahead and take that back to my serger, and I'm going to finish and stitch it together at the same time. But I'm gonna start from right in that middle notch. I'm gonna veer into it. So I start just like slightly off of the fabric and then veer into it in a straightaway. And what that's going to allow me to do is to open up that bottom in a bit of a vent. If you're doing this in the poly cotton blend, or basically the one without lace, then you can choose how high you want that vent to come up on your leg. So I'm gonna be a little more modest on this pair, and I'm going to start my stitching at the very bottom mark. So the one that's not gonna show as much leg. And I'm straight stitching that at a 3/8 inch seam allowance and going all the way up to the top of the hip. I don't have to worry about veering on and off because I've already finished the edges with the zigzag stitch. If you wanted to be a little more flirty, then you could choose to start your side seam from the middle or the top notch. So there's that vent that I was talking about. And because we did that little bit of veering on and off with the serger, I'm able to open that vent up and it can lie flat. And that's important because we're gonna top stitch this and you need that little bit to lie flat. So we're gonna need to pin that down. And one thing that I always do while I'm sewing, and this is going to change your game if you're a beginner. So you wanna think about how the fabric is, what direction the fabric is gonna go under the sewing machine. So if you know the direction that the fabric is going to go under the sewing machine, then you can place your pins in the right direction so that you can pull them out more easily. If you place them, like if I had put the pin heads the opposite direction, then when I went to sew it, it would be really hard for me to pull the pins out because they're facing the wrong direction, and they can also get caught underneath your sewing machine. So I'm thinking about that. I'm kind of pre-planning that in my head. Same thing with the poly cotton blend. I'm just opening up that vent. I'm just tucking it back. It's about 1/4 of an inch, a pretty narrow little fold back. So you're gonna come up and it's about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. It's a pretty narrow stitch. And then when you get just a little bit above where your vent is sewn, then you sew across that and flip it back down and go all the way down to the bottom. You might have to guide the lace because it does have a tendency to get caught in the throat plate. So there's your finished vent, and you can always take that to press on the silky satin. The silky satin, I've noticed, it just really needs a little bit of pressing to make it lie flat. So I am finishing the top waist of the silky satin here with my overedge stitch, and then I'm going to prepare the elastic by taking my waist measurement with the elastic and then subtracting about 1 inch. And the seam allowance is, there's a little bit of an overlap here. So it's my waist and then just a little snug. I don't want to make a muffin top, so I don't want it to be super snug. Like, you do you. If you're into muffin tops, like, go ahead and make it snug. So it's about a 3/8 inch seam allowance there. And then I'm going to stitch down, I'm gonna zigzag, I'm gonna change my machine setting to zigzag and then stitch that down so that it's not creating bulk or bothering underneath the waistband. I just changed it to a narrow, tight zigzag and I'm zigzagging that down. That's just like a little bit of a tip to make it look like more of a finished garment and then for it to lie flat underneath your waistband. I need to mark 3 points on there. So I have my center back already marked just by proxy, and then I am doing center front and then folding it in half and doing the sides. So once I have it divided into quarters, then I can go ahead and match those up with the center back and the center front and the side seams of the shorts. And what I like to do is just pin it right there. I don't pin more than I really need to. What you're gonna do is ease the length of the shorts into the elastic. So I only want a minimal amount of pins because I'm going to be pulling it while I'm stitching it. So just take your time and go around and match up that center back, the center front, the side seams. You want the wrong side of the fabric to be resting about 1/4 of an inch on the edge of the elastic. This is going to make sense in a minute. We just need to catch that lip of the elastic. This is important though that you do the wrong sides of the fabric onto the elastic. I'm going to stitch that down, and I'm using my finger as I'm sewing this. I'm using the edge of my finger to figure out where the edge of the elastic is, and I've done it over here on the poly cotton blend shorts. So I'm using my finger and I'm just kind of figuring out where the edge of the elastic is and scooching the serged edge just over a touch. And at the same time, I'm also pulling the elastic so that it fits the length of the waistband in the shorts. If you're a beginner, that's a lot to handle. I just suggest go slow, because the worst thing is that it just takes you a little longer, but it's more accurate. So take your time, and if you need to pin a little more than I did, that's totally fine. So there you have it, eased in, and then we are going to fold it down and then down again. So it's one fold and then a second fold. I'm just pinning that again at the center back, the center front, and the side seams. So I'm only doing 4 pins. There it is again, roll down and then pinning it. Just making my way all the way around. So I take that to my machine, and this is also another tricky bit. So I'm sewing about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the elastic, but at the same time I'm pulling with my right hand to stretch out the elastic, and I am guiding with my left hand to make sure that the roll is a consistent width. That makes sense. So there's a lot going on with my hands here. And again, take your time if you're new to sewing. This looks overwhelming, but you can do it. Just go slowly. And you can stop periodically and kind of re-roll the waistband so that it's not spiraling or torquing. Torquing? I don't know, you know what I mean. So it's not spiraling and like looking goofy. You can see how I'm manipulating it with my hands. Sometimes I think when I watch my hands on film that they look like spiders spinning a web. Like they're all, I don't know, like each finger is moving independently of the other fingers, doing like one job. So you get to the end, backstitch, always backstitch. There are both side-by-side comparisons. It's pretty much the exact same thing. And there's the finished product. Tell me what you think. Did you go with the silky ones, the flirty ones, or the polycotton everyday ones? I need to make a cami that matches the this pair right there. That side vent, I'm loving that side vent. It is a little cheeky. Depends on how high you wear them up on your waist. Let me know which one's your favorite and talk to me down below. Also leave me technical questions. I love answering those as always. Definitely leave me comments down below if you have technical questions. Find me on social media at Alissa C. Montanez, hashtag Alissa C. Montanez, and I will see you in my next one. Bye. You know, these would be kind of nice for date night. I mean, not actual date night, like not like you're gonna wear silk pajamas to date night, but afterwards, you know, that'd be a nice like little thing to wear afterwards. But I guess it depends on how well date night went, right? Am I gonna put the silky ones on, or does he get the cotton ones?